He's been part of pop culture for over 7 decades, with 60 of those years being in film and television. Almost 1,000 separate issues, 16 television incarnations, 6 feature films, and over a dozen actors have donned the cape. It seems Big Blue will always be on the big screen, but let's take a look at some of the most memorable movie moments when it comes to the last son of Krypton, including the Superman curse. This is Cinematic Superman, the history of the Man of Steel on film, on a very special episode of Real School. I could talk about all the great television shows, the animated series, and the amazing straight-to-DVD releases that DC has put out regarding Superman, but that's an episode all on its own. So sorry Kane, Welling, and Daly fans, but we gotta keep it brief. Of course, you have to mention the early Fleischer cartoons. Without them, you wouldn't have Faster Than a Speeding Bullet, More Powerful Than a Locomotive, or the first time the character would fly on screen. But let's take a look at the first live-action Superman. The name Reeves is synonymous with Superman for a couple of reasons, but George was not the first man to wear the S. That honor goes to Kirk Allen. Columbia produced a series of serials starring Allen, including the aptly named Superman in 1948 and Atom Man vs. Superman 2 years later. If you don't know the name Kirk Allen, well, don't worry, you're not alone. And the reason being that the actor was not credited by his real name. He was only credited as Superman. You want to talk about faster than a speeding bullet? Geez, these days an Actors Guild rep would be all over that one. But we owe more to Allen than just crediting his name, because if it weren't for him, we wouldn't have met George Reeves. Columbia followed up the Allen serials with another series, Superman vs. the Mole Men, in 1951, always intending it to be a trial run for the television show. Allen turned it down, so Reeves stepped in and carried it to the small screen. So let's take a look at the Luthor Files. What did we learn from the early Superman serials? Well, it was obviously the first time we got to see the Man of Steel on film, but it was also the first time we got to see his arch-nemesis, Lex Luthor, played by Lyle Talbot, whose character didn't appear in the earlier animated series. We also got a strange dimension that Superman could travel to, which served as inspiration for the Phantom Zone, which actually appeared in the comics about a year later. Imagine a world where Superman was directed by Steven Spielberg. Well, we came this close to that reality, but the producer, Alexander Salkind, rejected Spielberg when Jaws went over budget. Yeah, way to go, Mr. Mixelpedal. No one can remember your name either. There was already an abundance of talent attached to this film, with Marlon Brando and Gene Hackman already cast, and The Godfather's Mario Puzo taking first stab at the script. But these films will always be remembered for Christopher Reeve, and he will always be known for creating an icon. There were many things to take away from these series of films, and unfortunately, they weren't all good. First, the good. No pun intended, this was the godfather of superhero films, and it was also the first time we got to see a strong, progressive Lois Lane. And now the bad. It was the first comic book franchise to go too far and basically sully the good name that they had created in the first 2 films. It's also, unfortunately, what really started this urban myth of the Superman curse, with tragedy and illness striking several cast members in this franchise, including Margot Kidder, Richard Pryor, and of course Christopher Reeve. Can you believe we almost had to wait 2 decades for the next Superman film? 2 decades. While I respect Bryan Singer for being a great filmmaker, and clearly a man who can make great comic book films as well, Superman Returns was not exactly the return audiences were hoping for. I, for one, loved what they tried to do with Superman Returns. Tried to do. Especially that Singer was paying homage to the 70s Superman films in feel and characters. And Brendan Routh did an amazing Christopher Reeve impression, but it wasn't the Superman we needed in the 21st century. So what can we learn from this? While unfortunately it wasn't anything new and exciting, it did show us what reboots should be. They should try new things. They should have a new attempt at the characters. Otherwise, why are you rebooting the previous films? With Man of Steel just hitting the big screens, at the very least, it does look like they are attempting new things. Perry is African American, no red underwear, and no kryptonite. Okay, so it's baby steps, but there are some other more progressive steps, as Henry Cavill is the first non-American to wear the S. Regardless of where the last son of Krypton's films may go, whether they leap tall buildings in a single bound or end up in the cinematic phantom zone, he's certainly come a long way from a Toronto boy's scribble almost a century ago. But until the next film is up, up, and away, school's out.